Good morning. 4.1 is out, and I need to make more videos to show some of the awesome capabilities that are in the latest release. So this video is specifically going to be around a new connection type called Amazon S3 Tables. So you might be familiar with their Amazon S3, their storage service. They've added this capability called S3 Tables, which if you look at the tagline, it's tabular data at scale in S3. So what does that mean practically? It means that you can make S3 kind of look like SQL and interact with it like SQL from our product, which means you can push not just raw data but contextualized information. So that's pretty cool. So in this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull some data from Ignition and I'm going to move it into S3 tables and kind of walk you through how that works and the capabilities that are there. So to start with the data source, I have Ignition over here. I've got in my address space some UDTs, a motor UDT specifically that has amps, RPM, some data, and then in my actual address space, I've got really simple hierarchy, line, paint, machine one, and each one has a motor. So I've got these two motors. And I basically want to move this data model into S3 tables as a table. So you can think these would be the columns in the tables. So the first thing I've got to do is I came into HighByte and I created a new S3 tables, and I'm running. You might see some weird host now. I'm running out of Docker here. So I'm running HighByte, and I have not put a license on this one, so we're in the trial mode, which is fully functional. But if I can't do this in 45 minutes, we'll have to hit a button. Not that bad. S3 tables, if you come in, so typical connection settings for S3, and that's all I had to do there. And then for Ignition, I installed the new 4.1 Ignition module, and I'm in Docker, so I'm connected to my host here. And what's cool about the new 4.1 module is it's all event-based, right? So we're not doing polling anymore on the data. So we get all the data changes, and then we also added this. You can read a tag path, or you can read UDT instances. So in UDT instances, you can put specifically the instance names that you want to grab that are under this tree, or if you leave that empty, we'll grab all the UDTs and ignore like just regular tags that aren't modeled. But in this case, when I do a read on this, you can see I've already got my data, look through that tree and grab the two motors that are in there in tabular format. So this is all ready to send to SQL. Now it's ready to send to S3 tables. So what I'm going to do is just create a really simple pipeline. S3 tables. We'll create that. And I'm going to create an event stage because, like I mentioned, we added eventing to the Ignition module. So what I can do is just drag in that connector. This is going to subscribe to the data changes and send the data changes for the UDTs. So initially what it's going to do is send the full definition, and then each equivalent update is only going to send the things in the UDT that change, and we'll see what that looks like when it lands into S3 tables. That's how we're going to read, and then for actual I/O, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a write new stage, and we'll call this S3 tables out. And what we'll do is we'll go select the S3 tables connector, and this is where we have a little bit of configuration specific to the table we want to jump in. So this is where we're going to jump into S3. And if you go into the normal S3 view now, you'll see that table buckets are here. And S3 tables is brand new. So it was announced at reInvent, which was late last year. We are one of the early implementers of it, which is awesome. We think it's a fantastic feature to add on top of S3. But you'll see that it's kind of like S3, but not quite. So I'm going to actually walk you through this side too, so you can see how to configure it. So table buckets are like you think of it as a container of tables, or in the SQL world, it would be your database as an example, and then in there would be your table definitions. I have a bunch of ones that I was just kind of messing around with. We'll actually specifically use this one to create a new one. You just give it a name. You have to meet the naming conventions and create it, and you're good. There's not a ton of configuration. Once you have it, it has an ARN, like a specific address point. So that's what we're going to use here. Namespaces are ways, like in a specific table, to start to have different data sets. So it's kind of like a schema. In this case, I'm just going to create one on the fly. Everything I'm doing here, like you have to create the bucket, but we'll create the table, we'll create the namespace and all the other stuff for you if it doesn't exist, and you have that option enabled. So the table is the actual table name. I'm going to call it Ignition Motors. One catch is the naming conventions for S3 are fairly strict. So for example, you can't use capital letters here. And if I did, it would produce an error. You would see that, but just note that you want to make sure you meet the naming conventions of S3. And there's a web page, you can see what those are. But if you stick to lowercase and just letters and numbers, you're pretty safe. And then what I want to do is actually create, like we do with other SQL connectors, we can write to an existing table, we can create the table if it's not there, and create an update means is if there's changes in the schema, we'll actually update the table definition. So I want that mode because it's the most flexible for this case. And then what I'm going to do is just turn this on. And you'll see we've got data changes coming in from Ignition, and those are writing out to S3, and everything looks like it's going pretty well. So what we want to do now is actually go look at that data, right? Like what's going on. So to do that, I'm going to show you the data in Athena, and then I'll show you a few steps just to clue you in or give you some clues on how to open up permissions, because you need permission from an account to read into the table. Let's jump out. All right. So I kind of already did it in here, but I'm in Athena now. I've logged into a different user's account. I'm under Aaron Semley, and what I'm doing is I can select the catalog, and you'll see the catalogs that I've exposed. In this case, we're interested in test. The namespace was created, and you can see I actually have two tables in here, motors 2 and motors. I ran this demo a few times just to make sure everything was functional. But you can see if I expand this, you'll see the UDT definition that came from Ignition. We didn't change this at all. Here's the UDT, and here's some metadata that we added. You could model this and change this all you want in HighByte. And then what I can do is I can run queries on this as if it were a SQL table. And these queries are running through Athena. Today, HighByte doesn't have an Athena connection specifically, but you can use our JDBC driver to do this. I think in the near future, we'll add an Athena connection so you could run this query directly from HighByte as well, which you can do today, but you have to install the JDBC driver for Athena. It's a little more setup. So you can see I'm pulling the data. And what's cool is it's only data changes. So what I'm doing here is you can see that the data that is in every payload, the metadata, and then for example amps wasn't in this update, but RPM was, and then volts updated. So we're just inserting null when there's no data change. Now you could insert each row with all the values. That's just a little bit of configuration change in HighByte. And what's really cool is I can come down and this is all dynamic. So if I come in here and I modify, if I put in a memory tag, we'll just call it new tag because I'm not feeling terribly creative today. It's a Friday, right? It's the end of the week. We'll create that, and then if we come back, and it has a null, so let's just put like a number in there for each one. And if we do that, we should be able to see this table definition update. Now, so if you go to the pipeline in HighByte, everything's running. We've actually updated that table. I'm not quite sure yet in here. We can try to refresh, but there was a bug in Athena where table definitions, whatever scan rate this is doing to query that metadata from the catalog, didn't update as fast. So we'll refresh this, but it might not be possible to see that schema change on the fly. It might take a bit to see it, but let's give it a go anyway. There must be interesting. I don't see it in either in the motor. I'll guess, is this? Oh, yeah. So I actually created a new table. I had a typo when I did this. So you'll see this. This is the new table I created with the I and the O swapped. My bad. Again, it's a Friday, and you don't see the new column. It's in there, but Athena doesn't update quick. So this is a brand new feature that came out, and AWS is like rapidly iterating on this. What's really cool about this is I can start to treat S3 like it's SQL-like, right? Before, to do this, I had to land data in S3 in like Parquet format. I had to go use glue and update the catalog. I had to do a lot of this manually. Now you can just land it immediately. And what's really cool about the use, doing this in HighByte is we get to, all the awesome things we do to make it dynamic. You can enable. And if you look, this is changing rapidly, but if you look at the way to integrate this today in terms of getting data into S3 tables, you have to spin up what they call an EMR, which is a compute cluster, and then you have to use Apache Spark. It's fairly, you can do it. Give yourself an hour to go install the components and get it running. It's fine. If you're doing it at mass scale, maybe that's the way you want to do it anyway. But if you're just trying to experiment with a feature, it's a lot of setup just to get data into S3 tables. Whereas with HighByte, you just saw me do it. It's really simple. So check it out. Give this a try. I really think, I think this is a good move by AWS. I think they're going to continue to invest a lot in this, and it's going to morph and change over time and become even more accessible. So we're pretty excited about it. And that's a wrap. And I'm back. Never end a video with "that's a wrap." That's my lesson. There's two more things that I wanted to mention that'll help you in experimenting with the feature. The first one is if you go to our user guide, it's not up yet, but under connections you'll see some information on S3 tables, specifically the permissions you need to open up for the HighByte account, the connection that we're using to connect in to be able to write to S3 tables. There's a few permission things you need to open for us to be able to successfully write from a pipeline. So that'll be in there. The other piece is once you have data in S3 tables, in order to read it, you need to add some permissions to the reader. So I didn't show that, but if you go into AWS Lake Formation, which I'm in now, and down here if you go to data permissions, you basically need to grant a permission to the table in the namespace. And just to give you a sense of what that looks like, how I did it, here I selected the user that I was using Athena in, and specifically a named catalog. And here you can see these are all the table buckets I had created. So I selected this one, and then under database, this is the namespace I had created. And then optionally, you can say, hey, grant this person permission to all tables. That was easier for my demo. Or you can limit tables, and then you can control their permissions. You can't, I'm pretty sure you can't do inserts and stuff through Athena right now anyway. But I gave super permission just because I was trying to make sure the demo went well. But you can restrict access further. And once you've done that, that's when you can log into that other account that I was kind of showing you, and you can see the tables and all this stuff. But you need to do that step in order to see it here. So just a few more details on setting up permissions and all that, just to help you out.